All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and start Chapter 7, the final chapter of the textbook. How do you know that you did what you set out to do? And this chapter covers evaluation. There's basically two components that we can evaluate. Students, what they've learned in the course, and also instruction. Our supervisors will come in from time to time to observe our program, observe us teaching, and that evaluation process is designed to help us identify our strengths and weaknesses so we can improve what it is we do. The second slide, the evaluation of student achievement, lists a whole number of components to that evaluation process. First and foremost is grades. You and I assign grades to student work, whether it's passing or failing. We all use a letter grade scale from A to F. A lot of times we'll also have a numerical or percentage value for grades. That's whether or not it's passing or failing. Most of us in the technical college system use a 10-point scale, with 70 or above being passing. Our nurses use a little different scale where 80% or better is passing, and I think that is set up by their state board of nursing examiners, and so they follow a little different grading scale. And maybe your local secondary schools have maybe different grading scales themselves, but nevertheless we're going to have some kind of scale to work on, and those students will either pass or fail based on that scale and grades associated with them. There may be a time that you and I may need to step back and reteach what our students need to know. Let's say if high number of students fail a test that we give, chances are they didn't grasp what it was we were trying to teach them, and so we may need to go back and review. Now, obviously we're sometimes kind of in a bind for time, and so that may not be that easy to do, but where we can, we need to go ahead and reteach, because our knowledge base builds on each other. And the next point for the advancement, if they do learn what it is that we're trying to teach them, then that will allow them to go forward to learn more advanced things in the course, and so they can build themselves a foundation of success from that. There's also times where you and I need to reinforce what it is that they've learned. I have been painfully aware of that this past semester with one of my colleagues that is in the process of finishing up his occupational education degree, and he's taken an algebra course at one of the community colleges, and I'm just surprised at how much I've forgotten about algebra, basic college algebra. I haven't been able to help him a whole lot because I've just forgotten almost 80%, 90% of what I learned in college, obviously because I don't use it. But whenever we don't get that type of reinforcement, we have a tendency to forget things, and so we need to constantly give our students that type of reinforcement that they can keep up to date with what they've learned and apply it. The next point kind of deals with the testing situation itself. Whenever you and I make a test, paper and pencil or whatever, we want the test to be valid. That means that it tests what we're trying to test on. From a personal example, when I was at LSUE taking botany, I had a pretty good botany teacher, but we also had a lab class associated with the botany class, and as we were going through our lab final exam, he said, everything's wide open from the first day you walked in to the last day of class. So it was a comprehensive final exam. So we began studying, weeks ahead of time to be able to cover all that information. He told us that what we could expect. He also told us to be prepared for anything. Well, the day of the final, it was pretty much an object type of test where we went from station to station, looking at about 60 different plant slides, different types of plants, and so forth and so on. And I don't know why, but he stuck himself, sitting on a chair. I can still see him doing that over the last station and looking at everyone that's had that question and looking at the looks on their faces. And as I got closer and closer and closer, I said, what in the world is that question all about? And let's face it, I might have needed the points. It might be the difference between passing and failing the course. Well, I get to the question, and that question was, what is the title of your lab manual? Now, who asked that kind of question? Unless, you really want to try to round up a test to a nice even number. To this day, I don't think that was a valid question. I know he would argue with me, tell me that you looked at that book every day for a semester, you ought to know the name of it. But let's not come up with questions like that. Let's keep it to the content and skills that our students need to know in order to move forward in their course of study. And then reliability is a little different concept. Our test needs to be able to yield the same kinds of scores over and over and over and over again. I don't know about you, but I don't have the time to go back and create brand new tests over the information that I cover. I might go back and rearrange questions to some degree, but as for coming up and creating brand new tests, I just don't do it that often. But once we come up with a test, that test ought to yield consistent scores. That students should be able to pass it. If it's too easy, it's not a true measure. If it's too hard, it's not a true measure. We need to find a balance, and that balance will usually give us some good reliability. And whenever we get to the testing course, we'll have a whole lot more to say about those validity and reliability. Objectivity is where you and I don't kind of put our bias into a test. Had a teacher in college in chemistry that made up a test. We studied chapters and chapters in chemistry, and all of our tests were 5-question tests that he just decided the night before, or else the hour before the class would start, what questions he would give us. And many times they were written on the chalkboard from a sheet of paper that he had just scribbled some notes on. Well, never thought that his tests were too objective. He just pretty much off the cuff come up with whatever he wanted. Let's look at what we teach and try to come up with tests that match the content and really are objective, and that everything kind of gets a nice bit of coverage within that test. And finally, practicability. Is it practical? You and I can make tests as hard or as easy as we want, but is it practical? There may be times where we may not want the test. The information that we provide May not be something that we would want to test on. We might have other stuff that is more important, more practical in the evaluation that we want to get on students, and certainly let's do so. So I think this is a good point to go ahead and kind of stop this video, and I'll pick up with the third slide in part 2 of this little lecture.